Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in. It is awesome to be back talking about football, thinking about football, listening to football, dreaming about football, really anything football related. I have like some kids in my neighborhood that play football. I'm betting on them. I'm just like thirsty for it. It's been like 3 months and I'm already like dying for this thing to come back. They've got me hooked. I imagine they have most of you hooked. That's probably why you're here. So, a couple things, guys. If you saw the post, whether it was on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you may have seen it at, we're going to go over a couple things today as far as opening lines. I do want to just make a quick note about the Bills, some scheduling issues and stuff like that, and we'll kind of get into everything. So, I guess let's start with the Bills, because they are actually the first team. They're going to be kicking off this season on September 8th against the Rams, your Super Bowl champions, which I loved them last year. Unfortunately, wasn't able to really make a whole bunch of money with them because they have just exaggerated lines every week after week like 4. But either way, still like them. So one thing I want to keep in mind for you guys this year, I guess more specifically the beginning of the year, is that all of these teams, all of the lines being set and the general public that will begin betting is going to go primarily off of feel, and most importantly, it's going to be feel that is directly impacted by what happened last year. So if you ask the general, just like lay NFL fan, they're going to tell you that they think the Bengals and the Rams are good if they even remember the Super Bowl, and then they'll probably go to their favorite team and talk about that. Your general bettor may be a little bit more acclimated to kind of some nuance and things like that. But for the most part, especially if it's just like your general public, shitter bettor, if you're not familiar with it, if this is your first time tuning in, the shitter bettor is the guy who is literally on the shitter Sunday morning putting bets in on his phone. So if you're that guy, we're going to try and help you not be that guy this year. This is kind of like your training video. This is the best time to get acclimated to NFL betting. While everybody's looking at the NBA, while everybody's doing horse racing and whatever the hell else is going to happen this summer, baseball, for God, just shoot me in the head if I ever start betting baseball. This is the time for you guys to be really focused on the NFL because you are going to get the biggest leg up right now. Without kind of deviating too much, if you didn't already know this, I am putting together a book. I've been writing on it or working on it, making some progress. It's not done yet. I do expect it to be ready to go, and I want to have it released here by early July, like let's say by 4th of July or so weekend. I'm going to try to make it free, so if you can reach out to me on YouTube here, if you want to, once I have the book ready to go, you can leave a comment. I'll get you the book. I'll give you all the data, the info, where all my numbers come from, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put it on Amazon. I can tell you that right now, and I'm going to I'm going to list it as free. However, they only let me do it free for a week. I have other books on there right now. After the week, they make you pay, they make you charge X amount of money. So most of that money doesn't come to me. Most of that money does go to Amazon. So if you can order it directly from me and it's free from me, why not, right? Anyways, let's get back into it. So again, general public guy is going to keep thinking last year was going to, dictate this year, or at least the early part of this year. One thing that I have noticed everybody seems to have forgotten, the Bills offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, one of my favorite coordinators / coaches, is no longer the Bills offensive coordinator. He is now the head coach of the New York Giants. So if you are going into this game, the kickoff game for the season, thinking that the Bills are going to be the exact same team they were last year, you're going to have some surprises coming your way. They have had some movement as far as players are concerned. They got a couple of new pieces, draft pieces, all that kind of stuff. But like I say every year, football is probably the sport where coaches matter most, because the coaching is going to directly impact what the players do and don't do, what plays get run, don't get run, your scheme, your fits, how much your coach adapts to the other team and situations. And the NFL is truly like chess. There's so many moving pieces. It's not your general, like, hey, people are just running into each other. I want the biggest, strongest guy. That's not the way it's played, or that's not the way it's supposed to be played to be efficient. So let's take a look at the new offensive coordinator for the Bills, and that is Mr. Ken Dorsey. Ken Dorsey really doesn't have a whole lot of highlights. He has been the quarterbacks coach initially for the Panthers with Cam Newton, and then he went to the Bills, obviously, and he became the quarterback coach for Josh Allen. They have since promoted him to offensive coordinator, which is kind of a good and bad situation here. I say good because he's familiar with Josh Allen. He knows, more or less the kind of the way that he needs to use Josh Allen and his strengths and weaknesses and all that kind of stuff, which is great. He's a great quarterbacks coach. At least he knows how to use these guys. The problem is he has never been an offensive coordinator before. And not being an offensive coordinator to me screams, I don't have my own plan. I'm going to try and implement the same plan that was left for me by Brian Daboll. The same playbook, the same everything that was done. And they're probably going to guise it as something like, oh, well, Josh Allen is familiar with this, the team, the players, or whatever. I don't give a shit. This guy has never put together his own playbook. He's never been an offensive coordinator before. So that may seem like a good thing, and it is to a certain extent. I think you're going to see kind of like a copy of what Brian Daboll did. You're going to see maybe some very similar tactics. The problem is, when this happens in the NFL, and obviously this isn't the first time this happened, we see the nuance come out and it becomes an issue. Some of you may not remember this, especially if this is the first time that you're listening to me, or this is maybe your first or second year really into like NFL gambling or trying to get into it. About 2 years ago, Brian Daboll was still the offensive coordinator for the Bills. However, their offense was not looking as sharp as it has the last year or two. Brian Daboll was really struggling to kind of find his groove with Josh Allen, and they tried everything. And if you don't remember, go back into their roster, just go back 2-3 years, and they were bringing in big, huge receivers. They were trying to get guys that could maybe go up and catch the ball because Josh Allen wasn't the most accurate. They were doing all sorts of things with the roster to try and help him. Then he realized, you know what, this isn't working. We need to switch to fast, quick guys like a Cole Beasley, like a Stephon Diggs, who can get off the line quick and can give him a short target, easy, open target right off the line. And that was the first key to kind of unlocking Josh Allen. So that's exactly what they did. Now, fast forward that, they still weren't having the success that they wanted. So what happened? They moved Brian Daboll, and I believe, if my memory serves correct, he is the one who requested to get off of the sideline and into the booth. So they moved him off of the sideline and up into like the coaches or into the assistants booth so that he could have a better eagle-eye view of the game. And that subtle change that was not even talked about, I don't even think I've ever seen that in an article. The only reason I know that is because I heard podcasts about the Bills, and they specifically mentioned that and how big of a difference it made for their team. That changed, that unlocked everything because he had a better view of the team, of what the defense was doing, of where he wanted to place guys, and just little intricacies, little nuances that unlocked a lot of his players, a lot of the playbook, all sorts of things. Now that Brian Daboll is gone and Ken Dorsey is going to be the coordinator, I understand Sean McDermott is still the head coach. He was not the one calling the plays. Neither was Ken Dorsey. And I think you're going to see these guys, at least initially, take a step back. And even if they get off to a decent start, at some point in this season, when the defenses start adapting to whatever Dorsey is putting in, he's going to really take a second to have to look at himself and kind of change up what he's doing and try to find those little intricacies that Brian Daboll knew so well and kind of tweak them to make everything work again. And a perfect example of this is looking at last year. The 49ers lost Robert Saleh, their defensive coordinator. They brought in, I couldn't even tell you his name right now. They brought in another defensive coordinator, and he even said in the offseason, in training camp, we're going to try to run the same defense. We had a great defense last year, and we're just going to keep it going. Well, he tried. He tried to put in the same format. He tried to put in the 4-3. He tried to use the same playbook. He was using the same players. It was not the same. There's little intricacies that he just could not pinpoint that Robert Saleh had down. It was his system. He knew what needed to be tweaked, who needed to be moved, who needed to be shifted over just one gap, where the linebacker needed to be, how deep he needed to be. Certain things that me and you may not see on a daily basis. These guys who create the systems, that's why they're paid the money they are. And when these little underlings come in to try to run that system, it's total night and day. And you're going from the expert, the creator, the engineer to basically the copy of it, right? So that all being said, that's one reason I am strongly looking at taking the Rams for that week 1. Sean McVay also has just a great way of scheming his players open. He's going to have all offseason to work on this. To me, he's basically the younger Bill Belichick. If you give him enough time, if you give him all offseason to scheme for you, he's going to give you some surprises. Just like you saw in the Super Bowl, he had some things kind of come out of left field, and it was able to get him the win and get him the ring. And if that wasn't enough, and if you're not really buying the whole Sean McVay thing, let's take a look at their season openers for the Rams. We're going to go back to 2019. This is before Matt Stafford came in, obviously, but they did win 30-27 by a field goal. They won the game. Good game. That was back when the Panthers had an amazing defense. The following year, which was 2020, they played the Cowboys week 1 in LA. Again, they do end up winning that game, 17-20, winning by a field goal. It's just enough to win it. And then last year, they kicked off the season with the Bears, with a total trouncing of the Bears. The Bears were just god-awful. That's Justin Fields, and I don't even know if he was – I don't believe he started that game. Well, you know what? Let's find out. It was Andy Dalton. So, yeah, they totally just put an ass-whipping on the Bears. And I think we all expected this last year. We knew going into this game that they were not going to throw Justin Fields there against the Rams and against Aaron Donald. So, definitely different, but we all knew that the Rams are going to win that game. That all being said, though, we're looking at this again where we have the Rams who still have Sean McVay, and regardless of what kind of shifts in and around Sean McVay, we can all pretty much agree that he is the brains of that function and that just everything. The whole entire organization revolves around him as a coach. He still has the same quarterback. He still has a lot of the same pieces. He still has the same players coming back. They just won the Super Bowl. And one last thing, just to kind of pinpoint this Rams pick here for week 1, going back to last year and just in general, over the last really, I believe, 15 years, only 13% of home teams that finish above 500 lose Thursday Night Football. And those Thursday Night Football losses typically come against divisional opponents. So what does this mean? This means that if you're playing at home and if you are a team that we expect to finish above 500, which we do for the Rams, that only about 13% of the time are we expecting them to lose. Let's just round that and say 1 out of every 10 games. I don't expect it to be this one. The Super Bowl champions typically don't lose that first opening game as well. And that's a little bit more anecdotal because it's kind of a newer system. That all being said, though, everything to me is pointing towards the Rams, and this line has actually moved. This is actually the line, I believe, opened as Rams -1, is now down to a pick'em. Now, usually I would tell you don't really worry about jumping on this line right this second because this is quite literally 4 months away still. So as much as I'm excited about it and I'm happy about it and I'm loving this line right now, I haven't put any money on it. So many things can happen between now and then. Really, the biggest thing is, so when it comes to this pick or any of the other ones that we're going to talk about today or any of the other games that we're going to be looking at today, keep in mind a few things. One, how much time are you willing to invest in this? Meaning, once you place this wager, you're going to wait roughly 4 months for your money to come back. So if you're going to be betting like a $20 bet And don't get me wrong, I'm not shaming that. Whatever your unit size is totally fine. We all started somewhere. I myself started at about a $25 unit size. It's not an issue. It's not the size of the unit. It's the way you use it, right? As the old saying goes. But the thing is, you're going to be waiting 4 months for this money to come back. And so it may not be worth a 4-month wait for you to tie up your money now. Whether you're using it to pay bills or you're using it to bet on the NBA or whatever, I'm probably not going to be jumping on this line just yet. I know a lot of the really sharp guys on sharp syndicates, they blast these lines as soon as they come out. And that's great, and there's a lot of holes to be found in these lines. But you really got to find out what you want to do with your money. Secondly, and this one is not as important, but there can and there will be injuries. Now, why do I say that's not important? Well, one, how many injuries are there going to be? Who knows? There could be, 2 or 3. There could be a whole plethora of them. And there could be injuries to both teams. So it may be an issue of, well, hey, this is kind of offsetting because they're both missing certain guys. Secondly, though, the only individual player that really, really is going to move a line with an injury is the quarterback. And hopefully we did not see either of these quarterbacks get hurt. Usually there's maybe one quarterback that gets hurt. If you go back a couple years, the quarterbacks that get hurt in the offseason typically are older guys. I remember the last big one that comes up to mind is Tony Romo, the year that Dak had to start. Typically, you're not going to see like Tom Brady getting hurt in the offseason. The coaches, the teams, the organizations are going to be really, really careful with their star quarterbacks to make sure they don't get hurt. And those are really the only guys that we're concerned with as far as line movement is concerned. So it's kind of a fine line because I know on one point I'm telling you, hey, don't worry about jumping on it right now. But on the other hand, there's not really a reason not to. If anything, the line is going to get tighter as we get closer to kickoff, meaning that it's going to be a sharper line the longer you wait. So, again, my personal opinion is I'm probably going to wait until, let's say, August, maybe July, before I start laying serious money down. If you want to put like a quarter of a unit on this just to kind of lock that number in, by all means do so. It's going to be really your personal preference. I may lay a couple pennies here and there on certain things, but I won't be putting real serious money as far as like my full unit size until probably, again, late July, early August. And that's really just for having a better view of everything. So that's the first pick. It's going to be the Rams pick 'em against the Bills for that kickoff at the minus 110. I mean, it's not going to hurt you. Secondly, though, I guess let's just go into the next pick. And you know what? Before we get too far into that, it is my day off today. It's a little early in the morning, but I'm going to be cracking a beer anyways. So, pardon me. Next one, Ravens at Jets. And surprisingly, this is only a 5-point spread. The Ravens last year lost their season opener, to the Raiders. Now, if you don't remember, that Ravens team was jacked up by the time we got to open the season. J.K. Dobbins was already done for the year. Gus Edwards was already done for the year. Part of their offensive line, a lot of their defensive players were all gone for the season or for extended pieces of the season before we even got to week 1. And that's, to me, the reason they lost that game. Secondly, though, the Raiders are actually a really stingy team on the ground. They don't typically give up a whole lot as far as, rushing yardage. And obviously the Ravens, that's kind of how they play. That being said, though, if we go back to last year, and actually even before that, the Ravens are 10-4. This has not been updated since last year. But the Ravens are now 10-4 in season openers, with the 2 losses previously coming to Denver, which is another thing we need to talk about. And secondly, they lost to the Bengals, which divisional opponent. So the Ravens -5 against the Jets. I really like it. The Ravens are just, if you don't know, John Harbaugh loves to actually try to win those preseason games. They love going hard. They love putting all their players in. And I know a lot of people kind of, naysay that now, especially after last year's injuries. The problem is the teams who don't do that, the teams who are not really actively trying to win, they're just kind of like going through the motions. Not all the time, but usually if they don't have a really strong coach, kind of half-ass their way into the season. And what I mean by that, well, it's really hard to go from, hey, we're just kind of walking through the motions. You might play a quarter, and we have these like 4 or 5 plays we want you to run just to kind of, and just, whatever, to, oh shit, it's go time. We need to win, to flip that switch. And yeah, these guys are professional athletes, so by all means, they can come out, they can play whenever they want to, they can win most of the time. But when you're playing a team that's already less talented, like the Jets, and yes, they had a good draft. These guys are still rookies. This is a second-year head coach, a second-year quarterback. It's still very green, literally. And it's still the Jets, right? But they're playing the Ravens, and the Ravens are going to be the exact opposite. Very seasoned, very kind of tough. They know who they are. They know what their schemes are. They know what they want to do. They're not really changing a whole lot. Now, the Jets are tough against the run as well, just like the Raiders were. However, they don't have this same weaponry and the same coaching that the Raiders did. The Ravens they really just outmatched the Jets every facet of the game, from coaching to players to anything. And aside from that, going back again just historically, not only have the Ravens won all of their preseason games in the last, I believe, like 4 or 5 years now, and not only have they won most of their season openers, they've covered, I believe, 3 out of the last 4, with most of their season opening wins coming by like at least 7 points. And I apologize, I know this is being very anecdotal and not very accurate right now because I don't have it here in front of me. But if you go back and pull up Ravens season openers, there's games in there where they're just blowing teams out. I know it's the Dolphins and the Browns that they have played previously in season openers, and they just beat the dog shit out of them. Screw it, I'm going to look it up. So you guys are going to be part of the process. You're welcome. Last year, like I said, they lost to the Raiders in overtime. This is 37-23 in the overtime loss. Lamar Jackson was healthy, but let's take a look at who else was playing. Latavius Murray was their lead running back. That's ridiculous. If you look at their receiving core, I mean, it is what it is. It's always been kind of subpar. Watkins and Brown, okay. Mark Andrews did his Mark Andrews thing, so it's really just not impressive anywhere. But the main issue here was the running game, and they didn't have their lead running backs, either one of them, and that's going to cause an issue when your entire team revolves around those guys. Next, though, if we go back to 2020, like I said, one of them was the Browns, and they put just an absolute ass whipping on these guys, where the Ravens just ran all up and down them. You had Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, just all going off. Really, J.K. Dobbins put in his 2 touchdowns, and that's another note for fantasy guys. I know J.K. Dobbins is kind of down in fantasy right now. We'll make another video about that and kind of why I believe he's one of these guys you should be looking at, even coming off the injury, and just kind of getting him later in the season. Secondly, though, with that run game that with the Ravens just always rely on, we had a better overall offense with Marquise Brown doing his thing, Mark Andrews kind of impressing everybody with his 2 touchdown game, and just, again, laying a total whipping on the Browns. That opener the year before that was against the Dolphins, a 49-point win and a 32-point win. And then the one loss in the last 3 years for openers, again, came because of severe injuries. I don't think the Jets are going to be a problem for these guys. I think that as long as our offseason goes well and smoothly and we kind of goes according to plan, we should see the Ravens come out and put another ass whipping on a bad team. And this -5 is just another line that I absolutely love. I'm going to go to one last pick here, guys, and this is going to be the Colts Texans game. And this is probably the one I'm least confident about, and this is the one I would absolutely wait longest on as far as putting money on, mainly because it is the Texans. I would be looking to bet this Texans team plus the 8 points. The Colts are just terrible at opening the season. And it is because of Frank Reich. And it's not because he's a bad coach. If you've been around here at all, you've probably heard me say I absolutely love Frank Reich. I think he's a great coach. I think he knows what he's doing. I think he knows how to use his players. But it's for kind of a myriad of reasons. So their week 1 openers, the last 3 years, have each seen a different quarterback. And again, this year, we're going to have yet another quarterback. So we just keep going through these guys. Frank Reich has just not had a quarterback that he can truly build a team around. He's had Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers. Now he's going to have Matt Ryan. Just not great quarterbacks to begin with. Aside from that, though, Frank Reich is one of these guys who loves to look at statistics. He loves to put together an efficient game plan. He likes to kind of pick apart his defenses and know where he's going to attack. It's very strategical, very like militaristic of we're going to not just run the ball, we're going to run the ball off the left guard at number 92 because he can't stop it going this way or that way or whatever it is. And you'll see that. And you'll see that as the season progresses, the Colts always, or at least under Frank Reich, always start slow and then kind of get into their groove, hit their stride in the middle of the season. And again, there's reasons for it, but I really believe that Frank Reich is just, he doesn't have the data he needs, and maybe he's still going off of last year's info, and so he doesn't really get these best starts. And the Texans, I understand that the Texans are not the team you typically want to be putting money on, but the teams that the Colts have lost to in the past have also been teams that were not really set up for great years. The first one that comes to mind is the Jaguars. And actually, again, so I'm just going to pull this up right now so we can just all kind of get a good look at what I'm talking about. So last year, actually one of my favorite picks for the opening week of last year, if you want to go back and watch that for whatever reason, was the Seahawks. The Seahawks were underdogs in this game. They actually opened as 3-point dogs, and we bet them as Carson Wentz last year. Couldn't remember his damn name. But I knew coming into this game, the Colts always start bad. They always start really slowly that first game, and they were going to be playing against a good team that loves to run. Had a seasoned quarterback, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't like they were playing kind of a toss-up game. We took the Seahawks plus the 3. They not only covered, they outright won, and the only kind of maybe saving grace I will give to the Colts is that Carson Wentz was playing on a bad ankle. I don't know if you remember, but last year in the offseason, he did tweak his ankle, and apparently he was still recovering from that. So maybe he wasn't 100%, but he did have a pretty decent day for being kind of on a bum ankle. That being said, let's go ahead and go back to 2020. This is the one that came to mind first when they lost to the Jaguars. This is Phillip Rivers losing to the Jaguars with Gardner Minshew. I remember this year was a total upset for everybody. I didn't touch this game because I had kind of already figured out the whole Frank Reich issue. I didn't bet with them or against them, but I do remember a lot of people being pissed, not only because of betting, but also because like survivor pools and things like that. The Colts had been a huge heavy favorite, and they just couldn't hold up to the Jaguars. And so again, we go from Carson Wentz to Phillip Rivers. Going back to 2019, we see Jacoby Brissett in another loss, 24-30. And this is an overtime loss, so it definitely was closer. This is the Chargers back still with Phillip Rivers, so of course before they had Justin Herbert. And the Chargers back then, it's a lot, I guess, harder to think back to it now because it's been so long. This is under Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn was one of, if not the worst, head coach in the league for many periods of that season and prior seasons when he was with the Chargers. The guy just didn't know efficiency. He loved running the ball, and he was just, again, probably the most asinine coach ever. It was terrible. I was so happy when they let that guy go. I'm not even a Chargers fan, but that being said, the Colts couldn't even overcome that, and they lost again. So in this game, I do like the Texans plus the 8. They're going to give you more than the touchdown to take the Texans. I think that the 8 is kind of a cushion for the books because they're thinking if you bet the Colts, even if they win, we don't expect them to win big. Keep in mind that you're going to see a lot of the public betting the favorites week 1. The public generally loves favorites, but they really love favorites come week 1 because they are still remembering what happened last year and how teams played and how people got impressed with certain people or certain players. So you're going to see some money go on the Colts. If anything, I think this line may get bigger, which is why I say this is probably the last one I would touch. Again, it's the one I'm least confident on because I don't trust the Texans really, if at all. If and when I put money on this, it'll probably be a half unit. But I'll probably put a half unit on the spread with a quarter unit on the money line just because I think the Texans could pull out the upset on this one. And maybe it's just like a tenth of a unit on the money line, but just kind of sprinkle something on it. I really do think you could see this line get up to like plus 10 by the time we actually get to week 1. So just another one to keep an eye on. That being said, guys, and I apologize. I know it's a long video. It's just going to probably run about an hour because we still got a lot to get to here. But next things next. I know a lot of people love looking at season win totals, and that's great. I will probably play a handful of them. I'm not huge into it, only because there's so many variances in a season-long bet. That being said, though, let's look at the schedule, strength of schedule, and kind of everything that comes with that. So first thing here, before we even get into individual games, strength of schedule and how it's kind of created. So this is from Warren Sharp from his website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Sharpfootballstats.com is another one of my go-to absolute needs for the season. So if you're not familiar with it, please get familiar with it. Bookmark it. Do whatever you got to do. Keep that thing on your computer. If you usually do all this stuff through your phone, it's fine. It will work. But I will tell you, it is a lot of data. It's a lot of numbers and charts and graphs. And from your phone is really not going to give you a great view of all of that. So, that being said, if you want to wait on me, by all means, I'm probably going to be talking a lot about this data throughout the year. And feel free to just subscribe to the YouTube channel and we'll, get you up to date. But if you want to be ahead of schedule, you're going to need a laptop. You're going to need something with a bigger screen or access to one at least so where you can see these things. That all being said, though, let's go ahead and get into it. This is based off of projected win totals. So the Vegas lines that came out for individual teams and their win totals, if you play 17 teams and all these teams are projected to get 11 plus wins, then obviously you have a really tough schedule and vice versa. And that's how we project these. So with that being said, the 5 easiest teams before I even get into that, I'm just going to tell you the NFC East has the absolute easiest schedule. And so for that reason, it's a little bit hard to bet one of them in particular to win the division. I think if I had to pick a team, I would probably say the Eagles or the Cowboys and maybe even just lay a little bit on both. But that being said, I'm not really going to play that, or at least I'm not expecting to, because the strength of schedule is just so easy. Most of these guys should be able to get to at least their 8 wins. And it's really going to determine, or what's really going to determine who wins is just the interdivisional, contest. And if they all go 50-50, or if somebody gets hurt, or if there's a big injury, it's going to make a huge issue. Sometimes if a team is just having a really good, easy schedule, they can kind of overcome, injuries to their receivers or running backs or whatever it may be. In this case, though, that gets kind of negated because let's say the Eagles lose, A.J. Brown. Well, yeah, maybe they can, go 500 the rest of the way without him. But while they're going 500, the Washington Commanders, which terrible name, they're going to at least go 500 as well because they're top 6 easiest team. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at betting these. season longs. But easiest teams besides that, we have Indy, Chicago, Detroit, Tampa Bay, which that could be a real problem for people. The Browns, the Saints. So, if I'm looking at win totals and I really wanted to bet the over win total on one of these, I probably look towards the Colts, the Buccaneers, and that's probably about it for now. And we'll get into what their individual win totals are. But the other end of that and just harder schedules, you have the Chiefs, the Rams, the Raiders, the Steelers, and the Texans. So if you wanted to bet an under, I'd be looking at these teams first, and the Jets I would include in there as well. And really, I'd probably be looking at the Texans and or the Jets as far as their unders are concerned. And I think really even more so the Texans. That being said, just a good little note here. So out of the 10 hardest schedules last year, so 32 through 22, only 3 of those teams were able to go over their win totals. Of the 10 easiest schedules last year, only 3 of those teams were unfortunate enough to go under their win totals. So if you have an easier schedule, there's about a 70% chance, if you have the top 10 easy schedule, that you're going to go over your win total. And there's, again, about a 70% chance you're going to go under your win total if you are in that harder part of the schedule with those last 10 teams. Now, of that, obviously, this year there's a lot of really good teams that have tough schedules, like the Chiefs, like the Rams. But we see some other teams, again, like the Texans, the Jets, really even the Steelers without Big Ben, who could really struggle this year and are probably going to have to kind of piecemeal their way through to some wins. So that kind of at least starts us off with, just looking at the season. But what else is there to look at? Well, let's look at the schedule. It came out. I'm sure most of you are pretty excited about that. I really wasn't too crazy about it, but I did want to look for the holes, for some inconsistencies, and kind of take advantage of them. And that's really what we're trying to do, right? Take advantage of people. That's how you get ahead in life. That being said, there's a couple of holes or discrepancies that we were able to pick out pretty quickly. And I think not only goes into season-long win totals, but also goes into betting games in the future. Because right now, a lot of different books are allowing you to bet all 18 weeks. So you can look ahead and say, I think in week 10, week 11, this team is in a really bad spot. I want to bet against them before the line gets bigger, because right now the line is probably going to be as small as it is, or as small as it can be, for bad teams. So I'm just going to say Atlanta. I'm thinking they're going to be a bad team. If you get into week 10, 11, 12, and you really don't like a spot they're in, the odds are their line is going to be bigger. Instead of being like, Atlanta plus 5, it's going to be like Atlanta plus 7 by the time we get there. So you'd be better off laying that money now or sooner than later. But let's get into the ones that I was talking about. We have 4 teams that go on road trips that are 3 weeks long, which is not just difficult and not just uncharacteristic of the NFL, but it is a really big hill to overcome for a lot of teams. And we'll get into the stats behind that. But last year, there's only really one team that comes to mind that had that same issue, and that was the Colts. I believe there may have been one other team, but at most there were 2. This year we have 4 teams that find themselves in that situation. It's the Packers, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Eagles. And the Packers, I guess kind of, if you want to take it with a grain of salt here, theirs happens earliest, which means of the 4 teams, theirs is going to be the least impactful. So October 23rd through November 6th, they're going to play at Washington, at Buffalo, and then at Detroit. So definitely some travel involved, and it's not too far, but it is definitely a good little stretch for them to not be at home. The Chiefs may be a little bit more impacted because it is December 4th through the 18th that they come into this issue. And the reason I'm saying they may be more impacted is that rest disadvantages, rest disparities And these like scheduling issues, these scheduling quirks, really mean more later in the season. If you have like a back-to-back road game in weeks 1 and 2, all right, not a huge deal. Your team's probably still ready to go. You're probably fine. You're really not injured. You don't need a whole lot of rest time, all that kind of stuff. If you have back-to-back road games, or in this case 3 road games late in the season, in week 12 through 14 or wherever it is where we're getting into December, you probably have some injuries. You probably are already, tired. Your team's already been playing all season long. You have the extra game. You've only had one bye week. You probably already had your bye week, and you're going to need to start gearing up for the playoffs. There's just a whole lot that goes on, and the travel is just not ideal at that point. But again, the Chiefs from the December 4th through the 18th, we see them going to Cincinnati, then going back to Denver, then going to Houston. So the Houston game, on paper isn't as tough, but they're going to be playing against Cincinnati, who they probably have a little, thorn in the side with. Then they go to Denver, which offensively should be a better team this year because of Russell. It is a divisional opponent, and Denver really was able to kind of put a lid on Mahomes last year. So that's going to be a rough stretch for these guys. Then we go to the Dolphins. Same time period, actually. We're going to be able to pick on the Dolphins. So December 4th through the 18th, they're going to go to San Francisco, which this is crazy. They're obviously in Miami. They're going to go across the country to San Francisco. My bet is they're probably going to stay there and practice in California that week, because then they play against the Chargers the following week. So it wouldn't make sense for them to fly back across the country and then fly back. So again, they'll probably stay there. And then after the game against the Chargers, I don't know if they're going to go home or if they're going to go straight to their next opponent, which is in Buffalo. So they're going to go from Florida across the country, most likely stay there for 2 weeks, then go across the country again to the other tip of the north side of the country to play against Buffalo before going back home. That's a long road trip. That's going to be difficult for a team that is kind of on the younger side. I know Tyreek Hill is there now. I don't think Tua really has the arm to get him deep shots, so it's going to be a lot of receptions or pitch and catch here and see how far he can take it. And doing that for 3 weeks straight, definitely going to put a toll on these guys. The Eagles are the last team that we see have this issue, and I think their biggest problem with this is not only does it come the latest in the season, it's December 11th through December 24th, but it comes against 2 divisional opponents. So if you're looking at the screen, they're going to play the Giants, obviously again, divisional opponent, on December 11th. Then they go to play in Chicago. Then they go to play the Cowboys on Christmas Eve, December 24th, in Dallas. That's a lot of travel. So you're going from Philly to New York, so not too crazy, but then go back home because you're not staying there the week. Then you're going to go to Chicago, go back home, go back to Dallas before going back home to play against the Saints. So these divisional opponents are really difficult, especially because this is for the Dallas game. This is going to be the second time they've seen Dallas already, and that's not obviously with divisional opponents, it's not great. They probably already know a lot of what you want to do. And if the Eagles are who we're thinking they're going to be this year, they're probably going to be very run heavy and relatively predictable. But let's get into the statistics behind that 3-game win percentage, or the 3-game road trip, I should say. All right, so digging into this here, when it comes to 3 straight road games, in Game 1, this is going back to 2015, so it's about 5 years or 6 years worth of data now. Game 1, the traveling team covers, are they against the spread, 56% of the time. Now, this is not something that can be quantified, but just my rationale for that, because I'm trying to kind of put the numbers together with real-world scenarios. That first game, the team is still committed. They've just left. They understand they're going to be on the road. They know what they have to do. They're there. It's work. It's a job. Now, that being said, this also kind of got impacted or influenced a little bit with COVID, and that was actually a positive for a lot of these teams, And the reason I say that is because previously, like in 2018, 2019 even, teams would travel, they would land, maybe they practice or walk through, then they let the players go out and do whatever they wanted to do as long as they were back in, by a certain time, which seems okay, except a lot of these guys are going out, they're partying, they're drinking, they're doing whatever. They're 22, 24, 25-year-old guys with money in their pocket. That first week was usually the serious week. That was the, hey, we're here for a job, we're here to do this or that. By the time week 2 came around, not only are they tired and they're probably fatigued from traveling, they haven't been at home, they haven't seen their family, they're getting kind of preoccupied with other stuff, but they also kind of try to let loose. So in the earlier example where I was saying that Miami's probably going to be staying the week in LA, I understand they live in Miami, so it's not like they live in Arkansas, but they're going to be in California. They're going to be possibly in LA because they're going to be playing the Chargers with the nightlife, with clubs and parties and people and Hollywood and all that kind of crap. And they're going to be doing stuff. They're humans. They're young kids. You're going to be getting that kind of, residual fallout from this. And without COVID regulations, these guys are going to be able to go out and do that. So I do expect this to get maybe even a little worse than what we've seen in the last year or two because of that issue. So they have that second game, that second week kind of lull. The third week, we usually see just a little bit of a perk back up. One, they understand it's their last game, on the road. They know they're getting ready to go back home. Two, they have kind of, gotten their ass chewed out because they probably lost the second game or they didn't cover. It was a sloppier game than it needed to be. And they kind of get back ready in game mode for week 3. But again, you're still dealing with fatigue. You're still dealing with guys who really haven't got to be at home for 3 weeks, who probably have, families, homes, girlfriends, moms, whatever, that are essentially, they're trying to tell them, kind of keep them involved with their family and things, even though they're really on a work trip for like 3 weeks straight. So it's definitely hard. These guys, I'm not blaming them. It's definitely, it's human. But we need to know that when it comes to gambling. So that first week of any of those games that I was talking about, like the Eagles in December 11th against the Giants, I'm most likely going to be, betting the Eagles to win that game or to cover that game. Same thing with the Packers, the Chiefs, and the Dolphins. Those first games are probably going to be the games I'm taking them in, especially in the games where we see kind of a lighter matchup, something like the Packers where they're playing Washington. Not that we think Washington's going to be terrible, but it is a matchup we could see them winning. The Chiefs, though, come week 2, playing against Denver, I'm definitely looking at Denver for that game right now. That's not going to be till December 11th, but I'm already looking at it. I'm already circling it. I'm already getting my money ready to put down on that game. And that's another thing, guys, and that's something that I wanted to highlight right now before I forget. There's certain games that are going to give you big advantages, especially if you're doing your homework, if you're doing your research, and if you're watching this video, especially if you're watching this in the summertime, it's like May, June, July. You are one of these people that should have an edge in NFL betting. You're putting the work in, you're putting the time in. There's certain games that are going to open up for you where I know it took me a while to kind of feel comfortable with, like, hey, I really want to just circle that game. And I usually personally don't do more than one unit. But if it's a game that I really feel that strongly about, I may find other ways to play that game. So instead of just playing the one unit on the team, it may be one unit plus we're going to put some maybe a parlay with something, and it'll be involved within the same game, or it'll be like a player prop or something like that, just because we kind of have that feel and we have several reasons pointing towards one team. So that's the road game schedule. That's kind of the one of the bigger advantages that I've seen and we're looking at. Also, though, another game in particular I wanted to point out is going to happen in week 2, and it also involves the Texans. This week 2 game, so one of the advantages that the Broncos have had, and it really hasn't been talked about because they have not been able to utilize it, recently, is their home field advantage early in the season. So, and I apologize, I'm being kind of long-winded with these, but this is the time to do it, to we have a lot of time. We can kind of dissect all these things and different trends and things that you may or may not have heard of. But in Denver, they call it the Mile High Stadium for a reason. It is high altitude. It is harder for the opponent, your visiting teams, to come in and play in these high altitude situations. You're not breathing as well. But specifically early in the season, and by early I mean weeks 1 or 2, the teams are typically not in that peak mid-season form just yet. Whereas you get into the mid to late season, yeah, it's still a factor. You still have high altitude, thin air, all that kind of stuff. But by week 12, 13, 14, you're talking about prime elite athletes that have been training at that time for about 4 or 5 months straight and saying, okay, I think thin air is going to really, knock this guy out. Like, no, probably not. He's in peak condition. This guy's 26. He's going to be fine. Early in the season, though, when, one, you have rookies that are still kind of getting acclimated to the speed of the NFL. 2, you have guys that have been practicing in California and New York and all these other places that are not really harsh conditions to be training in. You're going to bring them to Denver in high altitude with thin air and playing full game speed early in the season before they've had a chance to really get their game shape. This is the best time to jump on the Broncos. Now, as far as the spread, it's a huge spread. It's 10.5, and I'm not touching that. And the reason I'm not touching that is because while I do expect the Broncos to win this game, the Broncos are just the style of play that they run is a very slow, methodical, we're going to really keep you in check on defense, and then we're going to kind of grind it out on offense. So I could see this game being like a 14-7 kind of game, or something along those lines. And they're just not covering because they give up like a last second, nobody gives a shit touchdown. What I do like, though, is the under in this game. Under 42 for week 2. Couple of reasons to that. One, again, going back to the conditioning for the Texans, I don't expect that team to come in and be in peak condition in week 2. Secondly, though, the Broncos have not given up more than 30 points total, a total combined, between them and their opponent, obviously. In the last 3 years, they have not given up more than 30 points in a home opener. In their home openers, they have kept teams extremely under their average. They've really kept them in check. I do think some of that is because of their home field advantage. Some of it is just because they're a great defensive team. But for whatever reason, they've been able to keep the totals under 30 points for 3 straight years in their home openers. Secondly, Houston last year with Davis Mills, not with other people, not with whatever his name is, the first quarterback that came out and got hurt in like the first game. With Davis Mills specifically, they average 14.75 points per game. 14 points per game, and that's including a couple of really big blowouts that really I just like. For example, the Rams. The Rams played the Texans. The Rams are up by, I believe, 32 points or something around that ballpark. Basically, the Rams just gave up. They said, oh, we're done. We won this game. They took out the starters on the defense. They took out the starters from the offense. They took out Matt Stafford. And they let the Texans essentially come all the way back and score what ended up being like 24 points. And that game really skewed the average. That also happened another time where the Texans just got on a roll. I think it was against the Chargers, and they put up like 40 points. So there's 2 big outliers there. And even with those 2 huge outliers for the Texans, they still only averaged about 14 points per game. With the Denver defense, I don't even expect them to get that much. This is one of those games that not only do I want to bet the under in this game, the under 42, I would even go so far as to bet the individual quarters and or half under. The Texans are usually a really slow starting offense, and it's primarily because of their coach. He likes to run the ball. He wants to run. and he doesn't really pass until he's forced to. And because of that, that first quarter is really, really slow. He's just grinding out clock. He's running it, and it's just going nowhere. The Broncos are going to be probably really stifling and kind of keep these guys in check. The Broncos do have the best quarterback they've had in a long time with Russell Wilson. So it is possible that the Broncos maybe do come out a little bit better offensively. But I could really see this game again being like a 14-7. Or maybe the Broncos do get 24 and it ends up being like 24-7. Either way, I really love this under. I'm looking to take that under and just smash that thing all day, keep it as low as possible. That's going to pretty much wrap it up for today, guys. There's a lot of other stuff I could get into. I have like literally pages of things that we can get into. That being said, just a little, I guess, hint of what's to come here is we're going to start looking at the numbers from last year. So games, how did they finish last year? How did they end as far as how many 6-point games, how many 7-point games, how many blowouts do we have, and what to expect on a weekly basis. Rematch games, because there is one rematch, which is Washington and Dallas, that I really want to get into. And I'm sorry, it's not Washington. It's Washington and the Giants later in the season that I really want to get into on that one. And also the rest advantage, disadvantage. And you know what? I'm going to throw that in right now, just so we can make this an even hour-long video. The rest advantage, and I remember telling you it was more prevalent towards the end of the season from weeks 14 through 18. Teams that have a rest advantage cover 58% of the time. That is huge. 52, if you're not familiar with it, 52.3% of the time is what you need to win just to stay even when it comes to NFL, assuming that you're betting at minus 110. So we can get to 58% late in the season from weeks 14 through 18 by just taking the teams that have the rest advantage. That is a huge nugget, guys. You need to write that down, take it down, put it in a spreadsheet, whatever you need to do. Put it in a backpack, remember it, don't forget it, keep it by the TV, keep it by the laptop, wherever you're going to be placing your bets. Secondly, though, dogs, so specifically dogs that are 4 points or more with a rest disadvantage, meaning they have less rest than their opponent, in the last 2 years have only covered 42.1% of the time. So if it's a dog and they have a rest disadvantage, 42.1% of the time is way under what you would need to just kind of break even in the NFL. Overall, since 2005, it's 45.8% of the time. So the last 2 years, maybe it was skewed by COVID. Maybe there are a few other factors in there. But overall, it's just, in general, not a good bet. You'd be better off betting the team with the rest advantage. If we look at the full season numbers on this, so favorites that are anywhere from 3 to 9.5 point favorites with a rest advantage cover 54.7% of the time. So essentially, you always want to be betting the teams that have the rest advantage. Favorites from 3 to 9.5 points that are equal rest only cover 45% of the time, and favorites that are, again, 3 to 9.5 point favorites that have a rest disadvantage only cover about 40.8% of the time. So the whole nugget here is you want to be betting on teams that have the rest advantage, and not only that, you want to be betting even more as we get further into the season on those teams that have the rest edge. So thanks again for bearing with me, guys. I know this was a long video. We'll be making more videos throughout the year, throughout the summer. I'm going to try to do one a week, and it will probably be like Tuesdays or Thursdays. And if you have not already followed us on Facebook, it's AG Sports. Please give us a follow there. On Twitter at AG_sports21. I'll be posting, things about football, movements, all that kind of stuff, but also when the videos are coming out, picks, and all that kind of great stuff. Everything's free. Always keep it all free. Don't worry about paying for anything. If you like the content, great. Like it, comment on it. Try not to tell too many people. We don't want to be kind of flooding the market with all the data. But lastly, guys, just have fun and let me know if there's anything that you've seen, any advantages you've seen that come out this year that you want to kind of notate, or maybe you want somebody to touch on, whether it's me or somebody else, and we'll look into it. But thanks again, guys. Have a great day. I do look forward to speaking with you again next week, and we'll have more great data.